A very warm welcome to all of you here. My name is Deepthi and I look after the market intelligence vertical at Fibre2Fashion. We are a 2-decade-old company who are into providing services pertaining to the textile and apparel industry, whether this is regarding recruitment services, advertising campaigns, market intelligence needs, or the B2B services. Today, all of us are here to discuss certain points on how second-hand clothing is transforming retail to attain sustainability. Let me just brief you through what all we'll be covering today. So the topics that we'll be covering today would include a little brief on what is second-hand clothing, how it is going to impact our system, what we can do through the use of second-hand clothing to make the circular textile economy and such. Then we will follow up certain key statistics on how fashion has impacted the environment over the last few years. What else we can do to contain the damage that all of the fast fashion has done to the environment. We will check the global market size numbers for second-hand clothing. What are the major export and import markets? Of course, they keep on changing. What new players are coming in? Who are the major key players who are already in this domain? What is the major target audience that you can target pertaining to use of second-hand clothing? Of course, we cannot imagine people from the older age, let's say 50 plus or 60 plus, going against and wearing second-hand clothing. Then you have another point on growth driving factors, why it is important today, why are we discussing this today? It is because of a number of reasons that we'll discuss following this on. What important role do brands and retailers can play in adopting second-hand clothing and ultimately contributing to sustainability? We have a brief slide on what are the most resaleable brands for second-hand clothing, whether it is the luxury segment or it is the fast fashion segment. And of course, what is the kind of future scope that we see? Now, when we talk about the introduction part of the second-hand clothing, it is very clear that they say that one person's trash can be another's treasure. Now, sometimes it is difficult to understand that people perceive second-hand clothing as something which is meant for the poor. But today, this does not hold true. The idea why we are discussing second-hand clothing today is because the advent of fast fashion has decreased the life cycle of the clothes that we used to wear, which has obviously brought up the cost associated with their disposal. So, as per the ThreadUp report, which was published in 2019, the second-hand clothing market is expected to grow nearly 1.5 times the size of the fast fashion market. This I am talking about will be by 2028. Now, why second-hand clothing and what all measures can we do to promote second-hand clothing? One important part is that if we are looking at second-hand clothing, it makes a perfect business model for manufacturers as well as brands and retailers, because it will transform something which is otherwise unwanted into an income generating source. It can become a parallel income generating source for brands and retailers, of course, meanwhile giving us the advantages of saving the environment and the natural resources. Now, it is in today's era that millennials and Generation Z are very, very focused on issues like sustainability, recycling, organic clothing, and contributing in each way that they can towards the environment. One way that I see resale offering us the advantage is that it will give us the kind of luxury of adopting multiple clothing without the guilt of wasting the clothing. So that way it will help us identify our needs also while contributing not to the disposable areas. Resale is one important factor which I believe is going to make fashion circular by raising the average number of times the clothing is worn. And circular economy automatically will provide an unprecedented opportunity to build restorative and fair approaches in the apparel industry. I believe all of you would agree with me on that. Now, here are certain key statistics diagrams which I have adopted from a report published by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation about the new textiles economy. What here is important is that if you see the current system for producing, distributing, and using clothing operates in a very, very linear way. Large amounts of non-renewable resources are extracted to produce clothes, which are lasted only for short periods. And the remaining materials end up in landfills. It is estimated that almost more than half of the fast fashion products are disposed within an year of their production. Now, this has been debated for long that a linear system leaves economic opportunities untapped, puts pressure on resources, pollutes the natural environment, creates significant negative social impacts, which holds true. The economic value of this linear system is difficult to quantify, but if I say that if we move to a circular economy, making the use of second-hand clothing, we can say that we will be able to benefit the world economy by approximately USD 192 billion. If at all these issues of sustainability of circular economy are addressed well by the players addressing the environmental and the societal fallout. Now, across the industry, when we see, it is only 13% of the total material input which is recycled after the clothing use. Otherwise, it will end up in lower use applications like insulation materials or wiping clothes or stuffing in the mattresses. So the loss that entirely which the textile industry does is 98 million tons in total per year, including oil to produce synthetic fibers, fertilizers to grow cotton, chemicals to produce dye, and finished fibers. Textile production, including cotton farming, also uses 93 billion cubic meters of water annually, which will always add on to these problems. Now, it is important that linear system is the root cause of this massive pressure on resources. So what we are focusing upon is to make the economy circular with the use of second-hand clothing. Now, when we talk about global market size, as I mentioned earlier, it is expected that it will double in the next 5 years and grow by 1.5 times by 2028. What we can clearly see here is resale was a very, very small contributing factor if I look at the year 2014. While if we are looking at 2018, it has grown up substantially. The reason being that there is a lot of focus by the key players emphasizing upon the fact that used clothing does not always mean that it is meant for the poor or it is not to be used. There are a lot of quality checks done by these manufacturers, done by these companies to ensure that the second-hand clothing that ends up at your door is well-versed, clean, and ready to use. Now, if I look at the major export markets and the growth that they are growing at, so I see that predominantly what we obviously expect is United States, United Kingdom, Germany, Korea. There is a surprising factor about China. By the year 2009-2010, China was one of the most important import markets for used clothing. But if I look at the last 5 years as well as today, the exports from China's second-hand clothing have gone up substantially. It is moving to the category of United States and United Kingdom, probably because of the awareness of the fast fashion system and adoption of quick clothes by the audience. If I look at the major import markets, I see, of course, some countries from the east side, including Pakistan, Malaysia, Ukraine. Surprisingly, India has brought down a lot of imports of second-hand clothing specifically to protect their domestic industries, which are producing garments, and they want the local audience, the local crowd to use domestically produced garments and not second-hand clothing. Meanwhile, Poland is one country which also exports used clothing substantially as well as imports. Now, whether this difference is between normal fast fashion goods or luxury goods is to be considered. Now here I have tried to pen down certain important key players that we have currently in the industry. Of course, if you see the current sales that they have and the year of foundation, you will see that most of them have been founded 2009 and onwards. The majority of these players are working on used clothing models, serving various kinds of services to clients. A lot of brands and retailers are also working with these players, emphasizing upon the fact that they provide a platform for the exchange or for the conveyance of second-hand used clothing. Now, if I'm looking typically at three players here, so let's talk about ThreadUp first. ThreadUp is one portal where sellers can choose between receiving cash or store credit in exchange for their clothes. And also they have a new program called the Upcycle, which offers an additional 15% in value if sellers select payment in the form of a partner brand's gift card. If a brand or a retailer agrees to drive traffic to its online thrift store and pay the 15% bonus to sellers, it can drive sales to returning customers without even touching the used clothing. ThreadUp is one company that manages apparel intake, pricing, marketing, selling, and shipping. So if you see the additional logistics and the quality checks are handled by the company themselves. The second player that I would like to talk about here would be the Renewal Workshop. This is one company that offers retailers a fully outsourced re-commerce service, managing their logistics, repair, cleaning, quality assurance, and resale to companies such as North Face, Prana, and Icebreaker. What usually apparel brands do is to pay them a processing fee at a rate comparable to apparel waste management and sell the renewed clothing in their store. The third that we will discuss here would be the Real, which is specifically meant for targeting the luxury segment of the market. Of course, as millennials and Generation Zs, everybody cannot afford a Gucci or a Prada bag. But if it comes secondhand, obviously the affordability increases. The focus here for the brands is to identify that we have to kind of adopt this luxury, but not at the cost of paying heavily. Now, if we come back to Real, this online store aims to become the first $1 billion circular economy company. And they have a partnership with Stella McCartney by sending consigned pieces and receiving a $100 Stella McCartney gift card. Similar to what ThreadUp does, a financial incentive drives sale back to the company. Moving on, let's see what is the major target audience that we have for second-hand clothing today. So primarily it will be the millennials, which are the age group of 25 to 37, and Generation Z, which is the age group of 18 to 24. Why these people? Because they are more aware of environmental concerns, they are more aware of organic clothing, they are more aware of sustainability rather than the older generations. According to the ThreadUp report, their current growth for adopting second-hand clothing is 37% and 46% over the last 2 years. Now, what is the reason behind these millennials adopting second-hand clothing? Because fast fashion is also one segment which focuses these two segments. So resale as a part of second-hand clothing will satisfy two biggest demands of the Generation Z. One would be constantly seen in new styles, which according to them is really important, putting up new pictures on Instagram and new clothes. They don't want their clothes to be repeated anywhere. Clothes not repeated anywhere would automatically increase the cost of acquisition of clothes. But second-hand clothing will provide a model which will satisfy their need of exhibiting new clothes while also bringing them affordability for new clothing. And second, of course, would be the sustainability conscious consumer. Now, why people are getting so conscious and so conscious about being sustainable today? One, because they know that a lot of damage is being done to the environment, whether it is regarding the oceans, which is filled with plastic refills, or anything other than depletion of water and other natural sources. So one way, they also want to display themselves as a sustainable consumer. Now, how are we going to target this target audience? Who are the prime sales for second-hand clothing? One, of course, would be the kind of online portals, which I just mentioned in terms of key players. Then there are thrift shops openly available in local markets. There are resale shops, there are rental shops, and then there are local markets. Coming to the growth driving factors that we have pertaining to second-hand clothing, there are 4 prominent factors that I believe are going to promote second-hand clothing in the coming decade. One is budget shopping, which allows a lot of variety in your wardrobe at affordable prices and also makes luxurious goods affordable to you, where first-hand is really out of the budget of a lot of people. 2, it gives you a chance to prevent waste. We're all aware that certain synthetic fiber products do not decompose, and use of second-hand clothing will prevent this decomposition requirement. Now, why decomposition stays haven't? Because we have a linear economy as of now. Product gets manufactured, we use it, we throw it, and it ends in landfills. What we are trying to promote here is a circular economy through second-hand clothing. So when a consumer uses it, it goes back to recycling, whether to the particular brand or a value addition company, and then comes back to the second consumer. So on and so forth. Third important factor, of course, is protecting and reducing pressure on virgin resources. Of course, for unmeasurable resources like cotton or wool or oil or other chemicals, reducing the kind of pollution which is done to water, reducing the energy consumption. And the last is the vintage factor. Now, a lot of people ask me that what is the difference between vintage factor and an antique good? Vintage factor is a kind of latest fad which has come up of wearing an outfit from a previous era or something that reflects the design and pattern of a previous era. Vintage clothes are usually collected as part of special collections in a wardrobe. So if you see, the 1920s had flapper dresses, long beads, and T-strap shoes, and the 1930s had bolero jackets, puff and fluttery sleeves, sling bags, etc. What I'm trying to point out here is that fashion repeats itself era by era. Now, when certainly the Generation Z and millennials are one kind of target audience for us, who want to have that vintage factor captured, also additionally contributing to sustainability by adopting it in the second-hand manner. Now, here comes the important part. What is the role of brands and retailers here? Now, if I see, brands and retailers have alongside always promoted the lowest cost of production of products, how best they can serve their customers, how fast they can replace the entire collection in a particular outlet. Never has been the focus on how much less they can harm the environment. And there had been a time that for very, very long, brands had not thought of how to become more sustainable. They had only focused on the revenue generation activity. It is recently that I have seen a lot of brands who are wading into the pre-owned and rental markets. Recently, Attain has announced plans for selling second-hand vintage clothing across its stores. And with the announcement, Attain also joins retailers such as ASOS, which sell vintage and second-hand garments on its marketplace page. There was a very, very interesting information that I found during the New Textiles Economy report published by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which clearly mentions that used clothing will give fashion retailers an appealing and a very, very convenient option to reposition their clothing in the form of a resale from a fringe to a mainstream activity. And introducing this has a low risk potential to harm or to let go of your current customers. It would increase your customer loyalty, increase your additional profits, while also promoting a brand's interest in increased usage of its clothing to its target audience. Why should brands and retailers enter the resale market? One, of course, it's an additional source of income, so it's a good revenue boost. Two, to become more sustainable, they have to take the lead in becoming sustainable so that the entire textile economy that we are focusing at is directly moving from a linear economy to a circular economy. Customer loyalty, if I have variety of products to be offered to my audience at varied rates, I think a lot of target audience which was previously not able to afford my clothing would be able to do that. New customers, again, with the same factor that if I do a second-hand affordable clothing line, I will have to acquire new customers from across the markets and increase their store or site traffic. So the number of foot-ins coming into a particular store or the number of visitations for a particular site will automatically go up. What we are focusing here is that resale of second-hand clothing will power apparel rotation and not accumulation. Now, there are three important models through which brands and retailers can adopt second-hand clothing. One would be the rental subscription, so where customers would pay a monthly fee to have fixed garments each month, which should be suitable for the fast fashion items and all types of clothing. Two would be the short-term rentals, where customers would rent garments for one-off occasions like a wedding in the family or a particular your graduation ceremony. And these would be luxurious goods, maternity wear, baby and children clothes for specific occasions. And the third would be, of course, the resale model, where customers would buy garments that have been used by others beforehand, which is applicable to all types of clothing. Any kind of adoption of any of these models is going to contribute to sustainability ultimately. Now, this is a little better version of how we think that brands and retailers can adopt these models. Of course, this has been derived from the Resale Toolbox report published by the Global Fashion Agenda. So if you see, there are various kinds of sale channels available here, whether they are online, offline, or a combination of both. So there are certain parameters wherein you can identify what kind of a retailer are you, what kind of resources are available to you, what kind of venturing into the resale market you want to start off with. So whether you want to start off with online second-hand shops, you want to start up with seller to distribution model, you want to partner with a solutions provider like the Renewal Workshop or ThreadUp to start selling your used clothing. So these are various kind of models that have been proposed for the same. When I was studying the entire topic of second-hand clothing, I came across a lot of brands, which was quite surprising for me as well, have a very, very high rate of selling via the second-hand medium. Of course, if I'm talking about Zara, it's a fast fashion brand, so we expect that a lot of second-hand clothing would be coming. But when I look upon brands like Gucci or Louis Vuitton, I know these are brands which are not affordable by all segments of the society. And if second-hand clothing adoption, second-hand brand adoption gives me the convenience of adopting this particular brand at a discounted rate, why not? Of course, we know that the generations that we have, millennials or Generation Z, have the option of collecting a variety of clothing and handbags in their wardrobe. So they don't want to continue using the same jacket or using the same handbag for a very, very long time. And rather than ending up in disposal, why not just share it across with other people who are not able to afford it firsthand? Now, coming to the future scope that we have for second-hand clothing, one important factor is that what we want to do from the second-hand clothing is to help change the linear economy to a circular economy. Resale of clothes, of course, can become a very, very important additional sales channel. It can be an additional source of income on existing products. So deriving a revenue from a brand new super dry t-shirt and deriving a revenue from a second hand super dry t-shirt are equivalent and an additional source for the brand itself. The only problem being here is the unpredictability of the amount and the quality of clothes available for resale. You never know how many of the charity donations or how many of the clothing vendors who are serving second-hand clothing are going to be on a continuous basis. Other challenges like shipping, sorting, storing, and repairing is very, very costly and are particularly challenging. So there has to be a precise supply chain channel working with you to adopt this kind of second-hand clothing or used clothing model. Second-hand clothing is going to benefit the environment in unmeasurable ways, and reutilization of clothes is going to contribute to making the economy circular. Surprisingly, extending a garment's life by just 3 months will lower its water, carbon, and waste footprint by 5 to 10%. It is extremely important that brands and retailers need to increase the resale of used garments, including in their own retail channels or through collaboration with third parties. So whether it is about sustainability or circular economy, we need to understand that it is high time that we react. It is important that brands and retailers contribute to such initiatives and to make sure that the industry is working together to achieve sustainability. Now, this was one of our first editions on second-hand clothing. We would be coming up with another edition soon. Let me also tell you that a lot of data that I have derived for this presentation has been extracted from TextPro, which is a market information tool. You can get on for more details on our website. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Have a lovely day, and we will just follow this up with a question and answer session.